Today, we are traveling back to the 1930s when bank robbers weren't just stealing cash, they were stealing the headlines. You see, during the Great Depression, the line between outlaw and legend was as blurry as a smudged fingerprint at a crime scene. And we're talking about big names here: Bonnie and Clyde, John Dillinger, Pretty Boy Floyd. These folks were the Kardashians of crime, except, with more dynamite. Let's start with Bonnie and Clyde. You've heard of them, right? The criminal power couple who were basically the Beyonce and Jay-Z of the crime world, except with more bullets and less music. Bonnie Parker and Clyde Barrow didn't grow up as criminals. Oh no, they had dreams. Bonnie wanted to be an actress, and Clyde, well, he was your typical charming troublemaker. But when the Great Depression hit, opportunity wasn't exactly knocking, so they made their own opportunities with Tommy guns and a Ford V8. Classic. Clyde had a passion for stealing cars, and let me tell you, this guy could drive. You'd think he was training for NASCAR, not running from the cops. The famous V8 Ford was Clyde's car of choice. Why? Because it was fast enough to outrun the cops, but smooth enough to make his escapes look classy. Bonnie, on the other hand, wasn't just along for the ride, she was packing heat too. Bonnie and Clyde weren't exactly criminal masterminds. Their early robberies were a little sloppy, but they learned fast. And soon enough, the duo became notorious for their wild shootouts and daring escapes, often leaving police in the dust, literally. But here's the thing. They weren't just robbing banks. They also had a bit of a Robin Hood complex. They'd rob from the banks, which many folks hated during the Depression, and share the loot with poor families or just burn through it with their gang. Despite all the chaos, they were seen as heroes to some people. Now, let's not get too romantic. These two weren't giving TED Talks on financial literacy. They were stealing and shooting anyone who got in their way. Three spree lasted from 1932 to 1934, and in that time, they hit more than a dozen banks, grocery stores, and gas stations. They were public enemy number one for a reason. Their streak came to a bloody end in 1934 when law enforcement finally caught up with them. Let's just say they went out in a hail of bullets. No happy ending here. Folks, for 2 years, they ruled the front pages, and Hollywood couldn't resist romanticizing their story. Bonnie and Clyde. Alright, let's move on to the LeBron James... No, scratch that. The Michael Jordan of bank robbers, John Dillinger. This guy was on a whole other level. Dillinger was no small-time crook. He and his gang hit over 20 banks and even a couple of police stations just for good measure. And when I say he was slick, I mean slick. He wasn't just stealing money, he was stealing the hearts of the American public. He became a folk hero, partly because people back then hated banks. To be honest, I think that's still going on today. If you had to choose between your local banker or the guy robbing him blind, who would you root for? Dillinger wasn't just good at robbing banks. He was even better at escaping from prison. The guy was like Houdini with a criminal record. He broke out of jail twice. Once using a fake wooden gun that he carved himself. Imagine the prison guards' faces when they realize they've been tricked by a piece of wood. Dillinger walked right out of the jail like it was his afternoon stroll in the park, and then he went right back to robbing banks. The audacity of this man. But of course, all that glitz and glam couldn't last forever. After nearly 2 years of dodging the law, Dillinger was finally betrayed by a friend. The FBI shot him down outside a movie theater in Chicago in 1934. Dillinger went out in a classic outlaw fashion, but his legend that's still alive today. Hollywood's made movies about him, and his name is forever linked with the golden age of bank robberies. Let's talk about Pretty Boy Floyd, the guy who made destroying banks his personal hobby. First things first, Pretty Boy wasn't something he liked to be called. It was a nickname the press gave him because, well, he was good looking. But Floyd wasn't into beauty pageants. He was into bank robbery, and he was mad at the banking system. Unlike the other criminals we've talked about, Floyd didn't just steal money, he actively hated banks. During the Great Depression, banks were foreclosing on farms left and right, leaving families destitute. So when Floyd came along and started blowing up bank records, people thought of him as a folk hero, someone sticking it to the system. Imagine this guy rolling into town, dynamite in hand, saying, "You can keep your cash. I just want to see the records burn." And that's exactly what he did. Destroyed debt records, making it impossible for banks to collect from struggling farmers. Talk about giving the finger to the man. Floyd's violent style made him a major target for law enforcement, but he was notoriously hard to catch. He was always one step ahead, hiding out with farmers who adored him. Eventually, though, his luck ran out. In 1934, the FBI caught up with Floyd in Ohio after a dramatic chase. Pretty boy Floyd was gunned down. Sure, you might not be able to pay off your mortgage, but at least Pretty boy Floyd tried to help in his own fiery way. Well, kids, what's the moral of all this chaos? Robbing banks might make you a folk hero for a hot minute, but it's also gonna land you on a very uncomfortable electric chair. And trust me, those chairs don't come with seat warmers. In the end, almost every one of these famous robbers met a not so glorious fate, whether it was being gunned down by law enforcement or getting caught up in the machinery of the very system they fought against. Their stories are reminders of how, no matter how flashy the crime, justice usually catches up. So, the next time you're in a bank feeling bored waiting in line, remember, you could be in the same spot that one of these legendary outlaws once visited, only they weren't standing in line for a deposit slip. But seriously, kids, don't rob banks. There are way better ways to make money these days, like subscribing to this channel and learning how to hustle the right way. Thanks for hanging out with me today. Drop a comment below on which outlaw you think had the wildest story, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Stay curious, stay legal, and I'll see you in the next video.